Yes, welcome in, ladies and gents, boys and girls. This is the Full 10 Yards NFL podcast. Yeah, it's great to be back behind the mics once again. A week is very long indeed in the NFL. Plenty of stuff has happened since we were last behind the mics. And here to talk all about it are the two other men on the screen in the huddle with me tonight. Start off with Steve at the bottom of the screen. Steve, evening, mate. How are you tonight?
Hello. Yeah, good. Lots of stuff going on. Franchise tags being placed like nobody's business. Contracts extensions going out. Yeah, it's all happening. It's all happening. Who knows at free agencies next week? You could never have guessed.
Indeed, mate. It's all heating up indeed, isn't it? And of course, a man who woke up very happy this morning with the news that broke from Dallas, and we'll get onto that very shortly. But Tim, welcome you, mate. How are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, not too bad. It's been a while since I've actually been behind the mic. So, long awaited return. Yeah, a bit annoying that I kind of prepped for this podcast all yesterday and the day before because it's all kind of gone out the window. It's I didn't realise the deadline, was it the franchise deadline's today? So, yeah, I've learned that one for next year.
No, absolutely, mate. And just on that, like you said, plenty of graphics coming in and out tonight. Some of them might need a little bit of updating. We're trying to keep up as quickly as we can. But as we say, things do indeed happen quickly. You'll see that the topics that we're going to go through, Dak's new deal, the New York Jets and what they do or don't do with Sam Darnold, the Washington football team, how are they going to address their quarterback position, what the Jaguars need to do during this offseason, obviously one of the UK's most supported franchises. So we'll look at what lies ahead for them. We'll have a look at the teams that have got the most salary cap to play with. Could be a real advantageous year to have plenty of cap space with the reduction with the pandemic. We're going to talk a little bit free agency in terms of one or two moves that we would like to see, and then we'll talk about our favourite live NFL moments as hopefully we're getting back towards normality and life as we know it, and who knows, we might even get some live NFL in the UK this year. Wouldn't that be amazing? So let's start then, fellas. The only place that we can start, Dak's new deal. Tim, it would seem wrong for me not to come to you on this one. Obviously broke overnight. Huge money involved, mate, but I know you must be pleased with your Cowboys hat on.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Dak Prescott probably woke up this morning and played this little song to himself, didn't he? Dun, 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 dun. Money, 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 money.
Do you reckon he strapped on the $1 million belt? Well, the first thing.
He probably bought and bought one, didn't he? But yeah, everyone seemingly does have a price, and the Dallas Cowboys did eventually obviously pay up. 4 years. Obviously on the first look of it, obviously it was reported as a 4-year deal, which surprised me a little bit considering obviously last year the length was one of the sticking points between Dak and his agent and the Cowboys. But if you look into it, it's actually 6 years with the back end 2 being voided off. And Cowboys actually did want a 5-year deal last year. And if you think that they've had this franchise tag plus this 4 years, they've essentially get their 5-year deal. And if you look at the money over the period, it averages out to about 38 million a year. Obviously, your 40 is the one that's going to be easily divisible when you look at 4 years, 160 million. But I think there's going to be people on both sides of the fence. It's just the nature of the game. On the plus side for Dallas, they'll have a 15 million saved in cap space this year, which helps them if they want to make a run and go all in kind of this year. They've certainly got the offense, and defense obviously needs a bit of tooling up. But as a fan, very happy. I said when I sent the rundown last week in preparation for this, I put the question, do you think he'll get a new deal or not? And I was quite adamant he would get a new deal to the point where I bought a Dak Prescott jersey last week that I'm still waiting for. Otherwise, I would have worn it today with absolute pride. Happy as a Cowboys fan. Just hoping now we can Dan Quinn can sort the defense out a little bit, and we can make a kind of a run, or at least have a winning record in the NFC East, which probably going to be good enough, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Could well be. Steve, you're obviously a fan in that division. So, let's get it from a rival's perspective. What do you think of the deal?
I'm not necessarily too surprised that he signed. I didn't think he'd go anywhere else. I was surprised it was now. I thought he'd play one more year on the tag, and then that would potentially put him in an even better position to then try and negotiate an even bigger deal next season. But I guess with his injury, has his injury forced his hand? I don't know. But even then, if it has forced his hand, he's still come out of it the second highest paid quarterback of all time. So he hasn't done too bad, has he? Interesting stat I found that from the 2015 and 2016 NFL drafts, only one of the 22 quarterbacks selected in those drafts remains with their original team, and that is Dak Prescott, which is astonishing. 22 quarterbacks and only one is still there. So my concern from the flip side of this is that if you look at what's just happened with the likes of Carson Wentz, Jared Goff, and potentially what might be happening with Deshaun Watson in Houston, is it now becoming a risk to give quarterbacks these huge contracts when, if they have one bad season or if they get injured, they're gone, they're out the door, because you can't afford to then have a quarterback that's not playing at the top 5 level. But that's an interesting question, and I wonder if the big blockbuster contracts could be on the downfall moving forward, because if you're not a top 5 caliber quarterback, are you going to get the deal, or are the teams going to roll the dice again? So it's certainly interesting, but it was a bit of a surprise, I must say.
Yeah, I think it's sort of really, unfortunately for the Cowboys, the way they've handled the last few years, they've kind of almost hamstrung themselves into this position. As you said there, Dak's now being paid the second highest quarterback in the NFL. Is he the second best quarterback in the NFL? I think even Tim's going to struggle to argue that one, if we're being completely honest. I'm not saying he's bad at all. He's a very, very good quarterback. But you mentioned 2 quarterbacks there. He obviously was in the same draft as Goff and Wentz. Incredibly similar career stats. Not a huge amount between them. Obviously Dak came out the draft a lot lower, so expectations weren't as high, and he's certainly outperformed potentially what his expectations would have been. But essentially, like I said, the Cowboys, Tim mentioned the defense there. That was obviously the big problem last year. When Dak was healthy last year, they were putting up a ton of points, and they still had a losing record by the time that Dak ultimately, his season came to an abrupt end. The Cowboys better hope that this offense goes, because they have got $100 million of cap space invested in just 6 players on the offense. And that's 3 of the starting offensive linemen. That's Collins, Tyron Smith, and Zach Martin. And then they've got Cooper, Elliott, and Dak. Essentially, like I say, $100 million in those 6 players on offense. That rises by 2022 to $125 million. There's not a lot of easy get-out clauses in these contracts for them either. You've then got DeMarcus Lawrence, who's obviously got paid in recent years. He's on huge money. I think he's $25 million cap hit this year. So those 6 players plus 1 defender are making up $125 million out of a potential $180 million cap figure. So I think it's great news for the Cowboys in as much as they've got their guy, but because they've paid so many guys previously, you're almost in this position there where I say it, they need to win pretty quickly, because the window is going to be extremely short.
Yeah, no, I think you'll see Zeke, and there's a few of those names that you called out that are probably going to be getting restructured contracts, and the Dak Prescott contract as well. Just looking at it, it isn't the worst in 2023 either. So, because of the way they've structured it, it's one of the few contracts they've actually structured quite well, and they've actually been a bit shrewd about it. So that's unusual. As a Cowboys fan, that doesn't usually happen. I think it's going to be telling to see what they back that up with in free agency. It is time to put up or shut up now for Dak. It'd be interesting to see what he can do. They could say his biggest knock is his 1 playoff win. We can now focus on the defense in the draft, and maybe an O-line piece as well. But let's not forget as well, Mike McCarthy. This probably changes the outlook for him as well, because he's got the quarterback for 3 or 4 years, and he's got all the tools, especially on offense. Obviously, Dan Quinn's got to do some bits on the defense, but it'd be interesting to see if the leash changes for Mike McCarthy, or whether or not that kind of signals, okay, we're going to give you a couple of years 2 years until we could technically get out of Dak's contract if we wanted to, or moving on. So interesting dynamic there. It's probably just a kind of a surplus to requirements in terms of narrative, but very interesting.
I think you made a good point, Sean, that like it puts real pressure on the team to win now, this year or next year, because they have to hit on this draft. They have to pick up, a good. I think your two cornerbacks are both out of contract, aren't they? The starting cornerbacks from last year, so they have to be picking up these free agents that have got to hit the ground running and start straight away. And next year, the cap number is probably going to be squeezed even tighter with those 6 contracts that you're talking about. Can they win straight away? I mean, the good news is for Cowboys fans is the NFC East is not particularly competitive at the moment, and so if you can put together a run, it could be said that you could quite easily take the NFC East. But then going further than that is a whole other ball game, especially with the repeat contenders in the NFC every year. Your Saints, your Packers, now the Buccaneers. They're going to be there every year. Are the Cowboys good enough to beat any of those teams? I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah, it will be interesting to watch. But like I say, Dak tied up for the next 4 years, and one of the significant quarterback dominoes has fallen back in the position that he was in at the back end of last season. Another quarterback that could potentially be on the way out. It is, of course, we're talking Sam Darnold here of the New York Jets. Talk that there's as many as 8 teams that have rang up and inquired about what the price would be for Sam Darnold. Steve, the Jets are obviously picking at number 2 in the draft. Obviously, a lot of people will say, that they stupidly won games at the back end of last year when Trevor Lawrence was very much in play, and they won those 2 end-of-season games. Let's assume Trevor Lawrence is off the board, unless the Jaguars really surprise everybody. They're obviously going to have quarterbacks in play potentially. They've got Darnold on the roster. What would you do if you were the GM in that situation?
So I think if I'm Joe Douglas, I think I'm taking a quarterback. I think the situation is too good for them not to do it. The guys that are going to be available, the likes of Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, are both really good players. They've got great metrics. They're athletic. They're good passes. They're accurate, and they can run with the ball. They're a complete package. Yes, they're young, and obviously they're rookies, and they're going to take some bedding into a team. But if you're giving a new head coach his new weapon, I think it's too good to be true. And I think the main reason I say that is because of the draft situation that New York is in this year. They already have 2 first rounders this year, and obviously their own second. If they can trade Sam Darnold and maybe pick up a second, I think a second is probably a fair compensation for him, maybe a high level third. If they get a second, they'd have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, which is an amazing amount of draft capital to be able to pump in. You take let's say Zach Wilson. I don't know if they're going to pick him, but let's say they take him. You've then got 3 further picks before the second round finishes, so then load them up with talent. And let's not forget they've got a huge amount of cap space as well. So I think they roll the dice again. I don't think Darnold is good enough to warrant them gambling on him. The league is transforming into this. The NFL that we see nowadays, where to win, to go all the way, you have to have a top 5 to 10 quarterback. It just doesn't happen without it. And teams are proving it time and time again that if you don't have that top 5 to 10 guy, you're just not going to you're not going to go all the way. And I think teams are now more and more starting to realize that if they don't have a top 5 or 10 guy, or can that guy get to that level? No, they're going to get him out of the building and they're going to roll the dice again. And it's happening more and more often. You look at Carson Wentz has been traded, Jared Goff has been traded. The Seahawks are thinking about Russell Wilson if reports are to be believed. The same with Deshaun Watson. Like, it looks like no QB safe anymore unless they are that top tier QB. So yeah, I would roll the dice. I would take Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, roll the dice, start again, and see if you can get Darnold out of the building.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think it's one of those that I think there are just probably a few more QB, I wouldn't say necessarily needy, but certainly QB teams that potentially are more ready to pull the trigger on a QB early. I mean, I think sort of somewhere in the 6 to 9 spot of the draft is almost the sort of sweet spot. And, you got the Eagles there, and now they've obviously got... they only picked up second round quarterback last year, and you'd think that they're probably going to roll the dice there and see what they've got. But obviously, then Detroit, is there really an affection to Jared Goff, or is that really just part of a trade to get Stafford out of there? The Panthers are the one that really scream out trade potential at 8. I think it's pretty much certain that Teddy Bridgewater's not the starter there in the eyes of Matt Rule. Could they move up from 8 to 2 potentially? You could be talking first round pick, obviously this year, next year, potentially you could be getting some second or third rounders added onto that as well. And I don't think it stops the Jets then potentially picking up a quarterback in that range. It could well be that the draft plays out that they end up, and Justin Fields, for example, still might be there at number 8 in the draft, depending on the way that it falls out. I just think it's one of those strange ones, really, that I think you could make a convincing argument either way. Tim just flashed Darnold's career stats up, and let's be honest, they're not particularly great, are they? 60% completion on his passes, just a shade under, pretty much a 1-for-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's certainly not been anything near the prospect that people thought he was going to be coming out of the draft. A lot of people had him as the number 1 QB in that class. That class, if you remember back, had got Mayfield, Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, and Lamar Jackson. All 5 of those guys went in the first round. And obviously, Josh Rosen aside, out the other 4, Darnold you would probably rank as number 4 out of those guys. I don't think there's any doubt about that in terms of what they've delivered so far. But he is still only young. I think he gets a little bit of a free pass because of the lack of talent around him. But obviously, Robert Saleh's coming in. He's very much a defensive guy. I just think that's for me the reason that it's difficult to really put a handle on this. If it was an offensive-minded coach, then I think potentially the writing would definitely be on the wall. I think the fact that it's a guy that specialises on the defensive side of the ball might be the thing that saves Sam Darnold in year 1, while Robert Saleh looks more at putting his defensive pieces together. That could be the reason that it ends up as it is.
It kind of smells like Josh Rosen 2.0, doesn't it, with the Jets at 2? But just for me, though, if you're the Carolina Panthers, just for now, they're just thinking outside my head. If you've got pick 39, do you send that to the Jets for Sam Darnold?
I think it's certainly a good idea. Is Sam Darnold another Teddy Bridgewater though?
Possibly. Possibly.
Into the point I just made, is he good enough to take the Panthers to the next level, or is that just another bridge gap for 1 year until they get another roll of dice at someone better? So, whoever wants to pick up Darnold, and Sean, you said that several teams have been calling about him. Whether or not that's to be believed, I don't know, but. If whoever picks him up, be it the Bears, be it Carolina, they've got to be thinking that yes, there's definitely someone there. We just haven't had the roll of the dice in New York. He hasn't had the receivers or the pieces around him.
I think the Jets stay. I think the Jets trade back from 2. I think they'll keep Sam Darnold purely because, yes, they've got a lot of cap, and similar to the Jags, they can just roll it all over to next year. They're not going to be a good competing team next year. So have another top 5 pick next year. Then you can do what you want, moving up and getting the guy you want. Who's to say that we don't know who the QBs, what they're going to look like a year from now? But I just think that again, it's dependent on what the teams like Carolina or maybe Washington might want to do it to and give them to trade up. I just think there's too many holes on that Jets squad, and Salah, like I say, he can with a plethora of picks can mold it to however he wants to run his defense. And again, to Sean's point, I think because he is a defensive coach, I think they'll give Darnold a year to see what he's got, and say he's used to working with a crap QB in San Francisco, so I couldn't help it. Couldn't help it. So I think they'll roll with Darnold. I don't think they'll get back for him what they want. Say if you're Carolina or if you're someone picking early in the first round, why not? Try even if you're Washington, just try and do a deal where maybe you give away pick 22 or whatever it is, and then get some seconds back, or work it out and you can get Darnold that way if they want Darnold. But if I'm the Jets, I'm not selling Darnold purely on the fact that I'm not getting my return on investment that I feel probably that he should be getting, but he's not showing it on the field. I mean, those stats that I showed, he had 1,800 yards last year. Dak Prescott played 5 games and literally nearly had as many as he did, or even maybe had more. It's just mind-boggling. But yeah, it's a shame really, but it happens. Not every QB, like Steve said in the Dak Prescott draft class, they're not all good. You know what I mean? They don't all transfer over. So. But fascinating to see.
I guess just quickly, I guess it depends on what they think of the QBs that are going to be there. Do they like Zach Wilson? Do they like Justin Fields, or maybe even Trey Lance? If they think that one of those guys is the guy, then they'll take him. You have to, because I mean, maybe New York Jets are a bit different, but you're not always in the spot where you can pick a second in the draft. So if you're there and you can take him, you take him. But eventually, on the flip side of that, eventually you've got to stop picking QBs. How many QBs have the Jets picked in the last 10 years in the draft? Like, you've got to stop picking them eventually,
Yeah, you certainly have, mate. You certainly have. A team that potentially might want to hope a QB falls to them is the Washington football team. New since last week, they've released Alex Smith, which I don't think was any huge surprise. As fabulous as a story as it was, he obviously wasn't quite the same player, as to be expected. And obviously, mobility was a big part of his game. That's obviously now severely restricted with what's happened to him. So he's been released, and quietly Taylor Heineke, the playoff hero almost, with his heroic performance against the Buccaneers, re-signed for a couple of years. So Heineke, as things stand, is essentially slated to start. For what we know today, I think he probably deserves a shot at starting. He played very well in that very small sample size. You've got to remember this is a Buccaneers defence that absolutely terrorised supposedly the best offense in football in Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs during the Super Bowl. Admittedly, they hadn't got all of their pieces available on that night, but that's the NFL, isn't it? It's next man up and all the rest of it. Heineke played very, very well indeed. In terms of Washington, where they pick in, is it 19, something like that? Maybe a bit lower than that. But you could have somebody there like Mac Jones potentially. They could potentially address it on day 2 with somebody the likes of Kyle Trask or somebody potentially falling into the sort of second round. But let's face it, this defense is what's really going to carry Washington. That was the absolute juggernaut of this team last year, and that potentially only gets better. There's a lot of young guys across that defensive front. Obviously quarterback does need addressing in some way, shape or form. There's potential, obviously, of some veterans in play. Ryan Fitzpatrick obviously wants somewhere to play again next year. He seems like a pretty obvious choice to come in if they think they really are in a position to compete. You know what you get with Fitzpatrick, but they may well say, well, we'll take the chances of some turnovers and that kind of thing because we trust their defence to sort of keep us sweet. And obviously Fitzpatrick makes more than his fair share of plays. So I think in terms of Washington, I just think they'll let it play out and they'll let it fall to them. If someone's there that they like at number 19 in the draft, they may well take a punt. But I think they're going to be fairly content with Heineke, and like I said, I think they probably will add somebody through free agency to obviously provide a bit of veteran presence. But
I don't like it. Yeah, I said back in December that we discussed whether or not when Washington went on their little run, and we said should they be tanking or should they be winning games? And precisely, it's not an I told you so segment, but picking at 19 is a hell of a lot different picking between 6 and 10. If there was, they make no bones about it. They are pretty much a QB away from being decent contenders in the NFC as a whole. That defense, yes, will carry them, but why have a limited ceiling? Yes, Tyler Heineke will start, and whether that's the right, I think he's Gardner Minshew 2.0 personally, not with just without a mustache. But if they were picking and were say swapped with the Cowboys or the Giants record or the Eagles record, you're at 8, 9, 10. You don't have to do a lot. Just throw a second round pick or whatever. Like I say, you're only a quarterback, maybe a wide receiver, maybe a tackle, which you can get in free agency because they've got a lot of cap space as well. They could literally be going from worst to first. And I just think it was. I get you played to win the game. I just think they've just put themselves in a bit of a bind because now to get from 19 to 5 or 6 or whatever, I just think they're going to have to give up way too much. And I don't think Ron Rivera and the guys in Schneider and all the rest of them, I don't think they'll do it because I don't think they. I just don't think they would. They'll probably feel the same in the Heineke. Oh, let's roll with him for another year. But another year that passes, that's another year that the defense, grows older and gets nearer to having to redo contracts. That defensive line that's got 4 or 5 first-round picks is going to have to be re-signed at some point, and it's just missing an opportunity. In which as a Cowboys fan, I'm loving that. Keep Heineke at starting quarterback. I don't care. And we'll talk a bit later on free agents fancies, and we've mentioned a couple of quarterbacks, and I do fancy. One should be going to Washington. I just think they're missing out a little bit personally. But fair play to Heineke. Got his contract, played well. Just don't think he's going to be he's just got such a limited ceiling, and you saw it in the games last year. Like, they didn't score a lot of points, they didn't move the ball very well, and again, it was just a kind of a ground and pound kind of approach. Just don't think it. Just get a quarterback in there, and they'll be easily NFC Championship contenders in my view.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tim. I think that Heineke will be the starter. I think he deserves it. I think he played well enough last year to deserve a shot at it, but also just because I don't think there's any chance of them getting into a position where they could take, one of the top four. But do you roll the dice on, say, a Mac Jones from Alabama? Is he good enough? I don't know. And then they're picking 19th this year around. I remember back in 2016 when the Eagles traded up to number 2 to take Wentz, they were 13th in the draft. In that year, they traded to Miami's number 8, and they traded away 2 players to get to number 8. And then they traded with the Browns to get to number 2, and traded 2 first-rounders and a second-rounder to get there. So that's a lot of capital to get from 13 to 2, to get from 19 to maybe 4 or 5. They're not going to trade with Philly for 6, and then after 6, there's QB-needy teams anyway. So it's going to take a lot to get up there if that's the way they want to go. So I don't think they will. I don't think they'll want to remortgage the franchise on getting up to take a QB this year. And interesting enough, and funny enough, it's come around full circle. I said it at the time, and the Eagles not winning in Week 17 doesn't really look so silly now, does it? It was funny when we talked about it at the time. It's one of those contentious issues of should you always be playing to win, but actually for Washington, they've almost shot themselves in the foot because the other teams had such poor records that had they have lost that game, they probably would be picking, like you said, like 7th or 8th or something like that. And then that's you're spot on. They are one quarterback away from being a real potential contender. But actually, with that not there, then the whole picture shifts.
Yeah, I just do hate the argument, though. I really hate the argument about whether you should or shouldn't be winning. Essentially, apart from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now, everybody wishes they'd lost all 16 games now last season. Everybody now would want to pick first. There's only one team that can pick first, and ultimately, we just spent the last 20 minutes or so discussing a quarterback that was picked at number 3 and a team that traded up capital to get to number 3. And how's that panned out? It hasn't worked. We talked about Dak Prescott, rightly or wrongly getting paid a mega monster new contract. He was nowhere near one of the first quarterbacks taken in that draft. All picking earlier in the draft guarantees you is an opportunity to have a bigger selection. Doesn't give you any guarantee of anything. I think Washington will just sit where they are. If a QB there falls to them, they'll take a chance with it. And good luck to them. I don't think they need any sort of guarantee of picking first, second, or whatever in the draft and saying, well, that's a surefire ticket. It doesn't guarantee you anything. So we will wait and see how it does indeed play out. Washington are one of the teams with plenty of cap space to spend in the off-season, but I'm jumping ahead of myself, same as I did last week. I could see Tim panicking there, but I've realised my mistake before I've gone too far. So let's go back to the pretty much surefire thing of the NFL draft, and that's, of course, the Jacksonville Jaguars picking number 1 overall. I don't think anybody now thinks it's going to be anybody other than Trevor Lawrence. I think that's pretty much been set in stone. I think that'll probably be the biggest surprise of the entire draft if he doesn't end up going there. So that will be probably pick number 1. But the Jags are then slated to pick another 4 times within the first 65 picks of the draft. They're obviously going to have a very, very young team. And ultimately, they've got the most cap space to spend as well. So, you would look at this as the ideal rebuilding job for a new GM and head coach. That's obviously why it was an attractive opening. But as you can see there, Tim's put down big needs: quarterback, left tackle, tight end, other needs, cornerback, safety, defensive line, running back. It's not as though this cupboard has got an awful lot in it. It's quite bare to start with. And they've already got a very, very young nucleus of players, to start with. I think personally, the best thing that they can do here is literally draft best player available. I don't think they need to go looking for these particular needs and sort of plug and play people in these positions. I think they just go with best player available on the board. And if I was the Jags, I would be probably rolling over as much cap space into next season as I possibly can, because they've already got a young team. I don't think they're going to be competing for anything this year. And, I would therefore be looking at this as a chance to evaluate the talent that's on the roster, give these young guys some experience, and then potentially in 12 months' time, where these players have then got a full season of NFL game time under their belts, teams are still going to be reading from the knock-on effects of the sort of revised salary cap, and there's a lot of teams battling against the salary cap, it seems, this off-season more so than any other season. The Jags could be in a really, really strong position here, and ultimately, it will be a couple of years before they can realistically start really talking about challenging, I would suggest, in the AFC South. So that's probably what I would do. Steve, what's your view on it, mate?
Yeah, I think this has got shades of back sort of 5 or 6 years ago. At the start of the Gus Bradley era, when they had that really young team, and they picked up guys on defense around that sort of time, like guys like Miles Jack and all those young defensive pieces that helped take them to that AFC Championship in 2017. And if they can get that young nucleus, like you said, together again, and then build from the youth that they've got, then that carry that cap space over when the cap next year is likely to be much higher again without the COVID restrictions, then they could have a ton of space to pick up some, then you've got your quarterback, we're assuming Trevor Lawrence, put some pieces around him, and then build from there. So yeah, I think you're pretty much spot on there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see which way they go. Like I said, Trevor Lawrence is obviously a very good building block for anybody to potentially start from, though, assuming that he obviously translates into the pros.
You can take left tackle off the knees as well, because they franchise tagged Cam Robinson as well today. So.
Not too sure on that myself personally. I think Cam Robinson's okay, but is he a premier left tackle? I'm not too sure. I suppose the franchise tag buys them 12 months to evaluate it, but he feels like a real contender to be massively overpaid when he does get a contract, which probably leads us on quite nicely to those teams that have got the most cap space to play with. Obviously, again, like I said right at the outset, we put these graphics together yesterday. Things may well have changed a little bit with certain moves that are happening, news coming thick and fast. As we prepared these graphics yesterday, these were the 5 teams that had the most cap space. The Jags, the Jets, the Patriots, Washington and Indianapolis. I think Cincinnati are in and around that sort of area as well. So if we include Cincinnati for the benefit of the discussion, chaps, they're the teams that have got the most cap space to play with. Like I said, it's probably an advantageous year to have the cap space available. Obviously 2 or 3 years ago when teams were sort of putting their contracts together, nobody would have had any idea what was around the corner. But obviously those teams potentially in a good position to strike. Steve, out of those teams, who do you think is probably going to have the best shot at having the longest run in the NFL 2021 season?
I think the obvious choice is the Colts, but so much of that is dependent upon how Wentz plays. If he's a bust and he goes back to the 2020 season that Philadelphia's just had, they could be 8-8 and 7-9 right back at the beginning again next year. So I think they're the obvious choice, but again, there's so many questions there about the quarterback position. There's a theme on this podcast this week, isn't there? We're very quarterback heavy this week.
It's almost as if it's the most important position on the field, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think that the Jags and the Jets have got too much of a rebuild going on, and you look at how teams have historically fared when they've had repeat years with picks high in the draft. It's often poorly run organisations that just don't get it right. So I think there's too much of a rebuild there, but I certainly wouldn't write them off going into next year if they can hit on a couple of draft picks and hit on a couple of free agents as well. But I think mine like sort of dark horses would be the Bengals, who I do apologise, when I looked it up they were 5th, so thank you for including them. I think they could be the dark horses, but again, so much is dependent upon Burrow and if he can come back from that nasty ACL and MCL tear. If he does come back and he can get up to a good level of play again. If they can pick up Penaiso, the generational left tackle at number 5, then they could really put some pieces around him. There's a couple of good receivers still left that haven't been tagged, because I know a few have just been tagged, including Allen Robinson. But they could look at adding a couple of good receivers to give him some more ammunition, and I think they could certainly mount a charge. But again, the difficulty with that is that they're in such a tough division. Are they going to win that division? Probably not. So again, it goes back to the question. It's really difficult to pick.
Yeah, Tim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much echo. So I won't dabble for too long. But yeah, I think Indianapolis are just one or two bits. They'll probably dabble a lot more than all the other teams in free agency. Wide receiver, and I think they need left tackle as well. And is it Costanzo that's retired? So someone like Trent Williams, who's 33, he'll be a perfect fit there for the Colts. But yeah, I fully expect Colts out of those lot to be going the furthest.
I think the Patriots are the interesting one there for me. I just think, they're right in the middle of that graphic, 66 million to spend. Don't forget they had an awful lot of players opt out in the COVID year last year. They're going to be getting Marcus Cannon, Patrick Chung, Dante Hightower, 3 real key significant contributors back. They've also added Trent Brown today back on the team in a bit of a surprising trade, effectively swapping a bag of peanuts with the Raiders, which was a very strange trade for a guy that got paid so much money last year, and he's an absolute huge man-mountain of a human being. Obviously, a lot's going to depend on the quarterback position. Let's not dwell on it too long, fellas. We've talked quarterback for long enough. That's obviously the big question mark there. Obviously, the Cam experiment didn't work. But let's be honest, I think Bill Belichick's going to be quite hurt by some of the narrative that developed at the back end of last year. If anybody could have won the Super Bowl last year, of course, it had to be Tom Brady, which obviously created the narrative. I think personally that argument needs to be separated. I think they can both be fantastic in their own right. That I don't think one needs the other, or vice versa. But obviously, Bill will be looking to sort of get the Patriots back competitive. You would obviously strongly fancy Buffalo to take the division. But I think that probably crazier scenarios than the Patriots back in the playoffs. And obviously, if they were to get there, then they've certainly got the nous to get the job done, haven't they? We've said there's news developing and breaking all the time, fellas. So again, we'll flash some graphics up, talk about some of the free agents that are still out there. It obviously kicks off in earnest officially next week. The legal tampering period starts officially on Monday. Free agency, I believe, kicks off on Wednesday, but trust me, by next Monday you'll probably know where some of these gentlemen will be playing their football next year. Obviously, Allen Robinson now being officially franchise tagged by the Chicago Bears. Kenny Golladay, one of the big names on there that I think it's been confirmed won't be getting the franchise tag from the Detroit Lions, so he potentially becomes arguably the best receiver available.
Godwin tagged by Bucks as well.
Has he? Yeah, well, there you go. That was obviously going to be an interesting one, what the Bucks were going to do. Running back-wise, Aaron Jones, probably the biggest name on there, certainly the one that probably will draw the most attention if someone is going to be prepared and willing to pay a running back. You got a few other guys on there. Gus Edwards, I think the Ravens have sort of said that one way or another, the Gus Bus will be back in Baltimore next year. And then obviously just a whole heap of other guys that are out there.
Just a bunch of guys. Just a bunch of guys.
Just a bunch of guys that play multiple different positions. So obviously, like I said, scratch Dak Prescott off the list, but the rest of the guys, pretty much to my knowledge, fellas, unless anything's broken in the last few minutes, will indeed hit free agency. The likes of
Brandon Scherf has been tagged.
Do you know what? Just forget all these graphics, fellas.
Yeah,
just forget them all. Trust me, there will be a ton of players hitting free agency. Hunter Henry definitely going to free agency.
Yeah.
Like you said, plenty of shopping to be done. So, just very quickly, fellas, just get a couple of moves that you would like to see happen. Doesn't necessarily have to be for your own teams, but just a couple of moves you'd like to see. Tim, let's start with you.
So personally, I'd like to see a vet corner come in, someone like a Richard Sherman, Buster Screen, Brashard Breeland from the Chiefs, Jason McCourty. Like I say, if we're in a 1 or 2 year window here, those are the guys you go after. They're cheap enough. Richard Sherman, I think, was tabbed for about 9 million. I don't think he'll quite get that, but there's plenty of safeties out there too. They're two big areas of need for Dallas. So if you can pick up, use that 15 million you've just saved from the franchise tag for Dak Prescott to his new deal, 15 million there gets you a corner, and that's probably a safety as well. So those are kind of Cowboys focused. The other ones I mentioned, Trent Williams to Indianapolis, just makes a whole lot of sense to me. Ryan Fitzpatrick to Washington, it would be quite fun as well. And I know you've got someone going to the Bills as well, but I really like Chris Carson going to Buffalo, or maybe like a Mark Ingram to get a bit more of a running game going in there. They're guys that can run in the colder weather and in the north, so they kind of make sense as well for the right price, because they've got they'll say they're going to be 1 or 2 year guys, because Josh Allen's got to be paid soon. So yeah, those kind of ones I'd like to see.
Yeah, Steve, how about yourself, mate?
Yeah, well, like you said, news is breaking all the time. The Saints have just tagged Marcus Williams, the safety. So, things are moving all the time, and some of the thoughts I had have already changed. Some of the wide receivers, Allen Robinson, I didn't think he'd be tagged by the Bears, but there you go. They've done that. So, I think it'd be really interesting to see Fitzpatrick go to New England. Would Bill Belichick take a risk on someone like that? I'm not sure, but could you imagine the storyline? It almost writes itself, doesn't it?
Woo! Wild card.
If Fitzpatrick goes to New England, he comes back to haunt the Dolphins as Tua falters, the Patriots scrape into the wild card at 9-0. And Fitzpatrick wins 4 straight playoff games. And
do you know what I love about Ryan Fitzpatrick going to the Patriots? He'd have a full house on his AFC East ticket card, wouldn't he?
Exactly. There you go.
Oh, make that happen.
Some kind of NFL pub quiz question for the future.
Yeah. 4 corners. Looking for 4 corners. Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, it would be good to see, like you say, certainly from a neutral perspective. With my neutral hat on, Aaron Jones is the one I'd like to see at the Bills. I think that Bills offense just lacking a real good running game. I think Aaron Jones is the best back that's going to hit free agency. He's obviously used to running in the cold weather as well. I think the Seahawks have been crying out for some pass rush help. They brought in Carlos Dunlap. He made a bit of an impact, and his thanks was being released. So thanks for nothing, Carlos Dunlap. But Yannick Ngakoue is one that potentially makes sense for me at Seattle. And with my Browns hat on, Levante David or Shaq Barrett from the Bucs would be fantastic additions at the linebacker position. Levante David, if you pushed me to choose one of them. But yeah, obviously, like I say, plenty of news happening and breaking all the time. Anything that really significant happens, we'll obviously keep you posted across all our social channels as always. Right, fellas, just going to finish off very quickly. Like I said right at the outset, we could even get some live NFL this year. Life is starting very, very slowly to return to something like a little bit of normality. And hopefully that means that we will get the international series back after a 1-year COVID hiatus. Just very quickly, fellas, just want to know what some of your favourite live NFL moments have been. There might not even be international series. It might be something that you've been and seen across the pond, so to speak. So, Steve, let's start with you, mate.
Just quickly, I didn't give any Philadelphia free agents because we're 34 million in the red, so we don't have any cap space. I went to the only international series game I've ever been to, which was the 2018 game when the Eagles played the Jaguars at Wembley. And that was really good. I've only ever been to one. I've never been to any of them, despite the fact they've been in London for 7 years. Is it now? I think it's 7. Is it something like that?
I think it's longer than that, man. I think we're going on for 10 years now, aren't we?
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, Tim's got the program there. Yeah, I've got that somewhere in my room. And the Eagles had just won the Super Bowl as well, so that was really exciting to see the Super Bowl Eagles come into town. Something you wouldn't be familiar with, Tim.
No.
But obviously, it was a very different team, but it was still really good to see the Eagles play, and it was almost like a home game. Felt like there was more Eagles fans than Jaguars, despite the fact the Jaguars are meant to be the sort of London represented team. So yeah, that'd probably be my only experience in the States has been college football and LSU, but no other NFL for me.
Oh, excellent, mate. Tim, you've obviously been to your fair share of the international series games, mate, but would that be one of your favourite memories?
Watching the Eagles playing bloody Wembley.
Obviously.
No, obviously got to watch Dallas when they beat and they slaughtered the Jaguars. My first one, the Saints Chargers game when Drew Brees threw it through the back of the end zone to lose me my bet. That was probably not my favourite moment, but yeah, it was one of the greatest games that you're on international series turf. Not had on my bucket list. Obviously, go to Dallas and watch a game in Dallas. The only other probably the neutral one was probably when Allen Robinson for the Jaguars had that lovely touchdown in the corner of the end zone against the Bills in that good game as well. That was a highlight watching that one live. But yeah, no, I've had a fair share of international series games. Can't wait for it to come back. I haven't been to Tottenham yet, so.
Yeah, no, certainly one on the bucket list, mate. I could just complete the full house and say the international series. I've obviously seen a few. Obviously, the Browns Vikings game. Little did I know it was in the middle of an 0-16 season, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless.
You saw Isaiah Crowell touchdown.
I did indeed, mate. I got very excited when we went 7-0 up, and I should have realised at the time that's as good as it was going to get. But my favourite live NFL moment probably goes back a couple of years ago. I was in Florida for a Christmas holiday with the family, and as you do, NFL Sunday was always the rest day in between going to the park. So I was drinking in a bar in Kissimmee, and I don't know whether you'll recall it or not, fellas, but the Steelers basically needed the Browns to beat the Ravens to have a chance of going through to the playoffs. And I just so happened to be sitting at the bar next to a Steelers fan, and it was quite possibly the most enjoyable 3.5 hours of my football watching life, watching a Steelers fan cheer on the Cleveland Browns. I didn't pay for many drinks throughout the course of the afternoon. Ultimately, the Ravens won the game, but it was a fantastic game. It was Baker's rookie season when he sort of came in and took the league by a bit of a storm in his rookie season. Like I said, it was a great game. Went backwards and forwards. Got really exciting towards the end. The Steelers fan got his hopes up, and ultimately, yeah, the Ravens won the game, and the Steelers fan was disappointed. But yeah, it was a very, very enjoyable couple of hours.
Did you wave him off? Did you wave him off?
I waved him off with a terrible towel, mate. Waved him off with his terrible towel.
I got one of those. I got one of those as well. I can't because my laptop's on it. But yeah.
No, keep it away from the bathroom, mate. It's good as extra toilet paper, if you ask me. Right then, fellas. Been an absolute pleasure as always. Like I say, I hope you're enjoying the new format. A bit more short, sharp, and snappy. A little bit more debate this week as well. So let us know how you think we're getting on with the podcast. We obviously want to make it work for you. Want it to be a little bit different to some of the other stuff that you potentially get to listen to every week. So let us know across all our social channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and of course the website. As always, if you want some discounts on your NFL merch, check out the codes that we could offer you for the NFL Europe shop. And if you would rather get your goods straight from the good old US of A, check out the lads at 5 Star Imports. Really great service from the fellas over there. Get you all of your merch straight from the US. Pretty quick turnaround, and like I said, great choice of products. Really good service from Stuart and Neil and all the guys over there at 5 Star. That's it for another week, fellas. This time next week, we could have players moving everywhere. I think the lesson for next week, Tim, is let's not prepare any graphics, because you can pretty much guarantee they will be out of date by the time we start recording and we end recording. It's going to be a crazy week. So keep your eyes peeled to everything full 10 yards. Been an absolute pleasure. And we will sign off, as we do these days, remembering to tell you that our mission is to reinvest back into the game in this country. So, fellas, Brit Ball on 3. 3, 2, 1.
Brit Ball!